Hello and welcome back to the SaaS Marketing Weekly Podcast with me, your host Ryan, the founder of Rocket SaaS, and we are back in the studio with Sam Gocher. Hello, welcome back.
Nice to be back. Thanks for having me.
Sam is the head of content here at Rocket SaaS, and today we're going to be talking about how when Sam came into the business on your first day, I basically said to Sam, I want you to audit Rocket SaaS's content. I want you to audit and understand and tell us what is working well, what is not working well, and give us a strategy on what we and you need to lead on in terms of improving Rocket SaaS's content that is going to impact pipeline, that is going to help scale the business. Because before you joined, we never had a content marketer in-house. It sort of fell on me a little bit and it just didn't get done very well. We just never really took it that professionally. We sort of did it when we had the time. So this episode could be hopefully helpful for everybody listening and watching in terms of this is how a professional head of content comes into a business and what they look at to improve. So that should help you if you are a marketer in the business and you want to improve your content, or maybe you're thinking of employing a content marketer for the first time, or if you are a founder and you are still doing content yourself, this is what you need to do in terms of how can you analyze your existing content, how can you make a strategy for your content that's actually going to help scale the business, because content is one of the most important pillars of scaling a business. So Rocket SaaS have scaled rapidly over the last few years. It's mainly because of the content that we create, and then the other stuff that supports it, like the ads, like the high converting website, like the offer. But if it wasn't for content, the ads wouldn't perform because we'd just constantly be trying to flog the bottom of the funnel. It just wouldn't give us variety. We wouldn't show up in enough different channels. So content really is key. And so many small businesses just don't have the time, or they just don't feel like it's the right place to invest. They feel they should be doing ads, they should be doing cold email, whereas really getting into a rhythm of creating content does require resource and it does require time to do it. But it was easily the sort of best decision that I made in my career growth, or business growth, I should say, in terms of properly going for it with content. So when you came into the business and I gave you that task, where did you start?
So with the audit, it was effectively a task of finding out why people were coming to us. What are the buying triggers? And so I took a look at our self-reported attribution. And if you're unfamiliar with self-reported attribution, for us, it's a little piece of a little text input on the form that you'd fill in for an initial call with us to say, how did you hear about us? Super, super simple, super easy way to understand where people are coming from effectively. So I broke it down into percentages. So I downloaded a CSV from HubSpot with all of our self-reported attribution in, put it into AI and said, tell me the main sources where people are coming from. So I noticed very, very quickly that nobody was citing, say, the blog, but people were citing the podcast very, very strongly. That was one of the highest pieces. And then second was LinkedIn. And then, there was a metric for everything else, but it was the podcast I identified as that main source of self-reported attribution.
Nice. Okay, so you looked at the self-reported attribution to see that podcast, LinkedIn was working well, blog's not working so well. And then I know Jamie's been working hard on our HubSpot attribution to also kind of give us a data-led version of that. And it basically told us a similar story, that the podcast was doing really well. And then you looked into some other metrics. Was Google Analytics? What was Google Analytics telling you about the blogs? Because that was something that I found interesting from your audit, is that we've been spending the last 2 years pumping out a blog every single week. But you came in and told us that they were pretty rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, I spent such a long time on that report that the numbers are effectively seared into my memory. In 2026, I think there was a total of 300 people that had been on the blog page or any blogs. Which sound 300, it's not nothing.
When you've created 52 blogs in a year and 300 visitors, that's not very good.
There's about 100 blogs on the website. So let's say every blog had an equal 3 views. It doesn't sound like much. And it wasn't much. And that was, to be honest, in the audit, that was the main thing I noticed that had been being done that wasn't having much of an impact. So then I was faced with, do we scrap it? Can we improve them? Because these blogs weren't SEO enhanced, because they were more kind of demand gen. They were taken from the podcast and reversioned. I identified very quickly that there were some elements of those blogs that weren't very, very optimal. So it was effectively They're effectively AI rewrites. So what I did was I redefined the way that those blogs were written. So it was focusing more on the demand gen. So it was taking actual quotes from you or from Jamie or whoever was on the podcast that the blog was about, and actually putting those quotes into the blog. And all of this can be done with AI as well. It's more just about changing the prompt. I added other things in, like internal links. So I want to have at least 10 internal links. Now we're pushing more towards the SEO side of things here, but this is me testing the parameters of what's possible with the blogs that we have without, say, any paid spend going behind them. If Jamie had turned around and said, oh, I want to put £1,000 behind each blog, then our numbers would have shot up. But it's a case of testing and seeing what's happening. So the current status of the blogs is that they've changed structure. And if you head over to the Rocket SaaS site, you'll see that the blogs they've changed compared to some that were on there historically. And the status is, in a month or two, I'll be able to see whether anything's happened, whether anything's improved organically.
So yeah, I think that's really key for a lot of businesses to understand, is that so many businesses are just knocking out blogs once a week, every 2 weeks, once a month, and they're just not affecting pipeline at all. When you actually get into the numbers, hardly any people are reading them. And if they're not bringing any SEO benefit, like, why are you doing them? It can be quite a lazy thing that a kind of marketing team can do, is let's just knock out some blogs because that's what you're supposed to do in marketing. So yeah, I wasn't particularly surprised when you did your audit and you told me that, oh, actually, this is just having pretty much zero impact. So yeah, we're still deciding whether we want to be scrapping blogs completely. But we've decided that now that we have a resource in SAM to actually get into this properly, let's put some real effort into these blogs in terms of, yeah, like you said, making them more SEO driven and actually part of the marketing engine, rather than us just got a bit lazy and we're just knocking them out.
Exactly. And I've had success with blogs in the sense that if we were talking about personal brands, say you'd written a sales blog focused at salespeople, ask a salesperson in your business to post that blog out, with a bit of a thought leadership caption and that side of things, and then the paid team can boost it and see what happens. That's when demand generation blogs can be interesting. You don't need any SEO for that to perform well. But yeah, right now we're just seeing where the blogs lie, seeing how, if these improvements affect them immediately or not, and then we'll make a decision later on.
Yeah. Okay. So you analysed that. You analysed that the blogs weren't performing well, so we got a strategy to improve that. And then what was the next thing that you really kind of dived into? I think you said that the podcast was something that was performing really well because the self-reported attribution, the HubSpot attribution was showing us that the podcast was a powerful thing. So I think you said that we need to elevate this. We need to accelerate the podcast. We need to invest more into the podcast. It's showing that it's bringing in pipeline. So if you want more pipeline, do more, invest more. I think we agreed that we're already doing a podcast every single week, so we don't really want to increase the frequency of that, but we want to put more effort, more budget into making it better, getting more subscribers, I think is essentially the plan, wasn't it? So how did you kind of go about that, and what did you find in the audit?
Basically, I just delved into, like we said already, so it was the self-reported attribution. I effectively, even before jumping into the hosting platform and looking at the downloads and all that side of things, I knew it was worthwhile because of the high percentage of total self-reported attributions citing the podcast. And then when I went in, I was pleasantly surprised when I went into the metrics as well. The podcast hasn't just gone up and up and up and up. Consistently, it's gone up and down. There's seasonality, there's loads of things, but the key is being consistent. This is why we're not going to change the weekly cadence. That's quite a lot. That's great, and it's amazing that even before I was here, you've been able to do that every single week, and it's clearly shown in that self-reported attribution. I also effectively found that while the podcast itself was good, there was an element of the repurposing which I identified wasn't doing so well. So effectively, you'd had someone creating clips from the podcast. It was low lift. It wasn't a marketing, it wasn't necessarily a marketing pro creating the clips. It was just
yeah, we had a virtual assistant just to create the video clips using an AI tool called Vizard, which is a really good tool. It's great, but wasn't a human actually picking the best clips, so I knew that they weren't great, and also it was me having to kind of review all of them. It was quite time consuming, and we put them out. They were okay. They did well, but I know that's one thing that you identified when you came in, is that you wanted to just make them do more.
Yeah, so something that I've worked on previously is, there's a lot of content on LinkedIn, let's just use LinkedIn as an example. There's a lot of content on there. There's loads of video. Everyone's jumping on the trend. So how do you actually make it stand out? Something that was missing from the podcast clips was there was a lack of a hook. So, and I'm not saying every single clip should have a hook right at the start. You need to keep your audience guessing what they're going to receive. But we're going to start with the help of a video professional. We're going to put effort and resource into actually hiring this video professional to boost these videos on LinkedIn and the quality of those videos. One of the main things I wanted to implement was a hook. So the way that I've done this and seen plenty of success from this before is I pick the clips. Don't get AI to pick the clips. It's not there yet. You know what your audience wants better than an LLM. Pick the clip and then pick a line, the hookiest line from that clip, and take it out of the clip and put it at the start. So you've got like 2 seconds at the start to hook the audience, then it leads into the clip. There's probably many people listening to this that have seen that type of thing on LinkedIn before, but maybe don't understand the actual effect that has. So we're going to start implementing that, and I'm really, really excited to see the results.
Yeah, I think that is definitely the best way to scale a podcast. Like the Stephen Bartlett Diver CEO podcast, they do it brilliantly. I think they must invest like thousands in every single clip because they got all sorts of crazy animations, and they always there's multiple hooks throughout, and that's what just captures people. Like, I mainly only use LinkedIn as a social platform, but you just see like thousands and thousands of likes because it is a real art form to kind of making those hooks and the quality of the edit. So no, I'm really excited to see how the quality of our shorts and our clips are going to improve the podcast. So I think that was the biggest thing that you identified with the podcast. And yeah, you moved platforms, didn't you? To like our current platform or previous platform was called Buzzsprout, which is a brilliant, easy, cheap platform that basically told us the number of listeners that we got into the podcast. But now I'm moving to Captivate, isn't it? Which is going to tell us a bit more information about when people are actually dropping off the podcast, to see any kind of trends as to like where we're going wrong, like the short form episodes perform better than longer form episodes, just more analytics basically. So keen to see what that'll bring. But in terms of moving on to like other content formats that you analyze, what else was there other than the pod?
So the next thing I looked at naturally was YouTube. Now, if you're listening to this episode as soon as it's come out, you can head over to the YouTube channel and see that it's not quite where it needs to be right now. It's just low subscribers. The thumbnails aren't optimized. There aren't really frequent uploads. And that was something I identified really quickly, and it does come back to the Rocket SaaS way of repurposing the content. So we've repurposed the podcast into so many different content assets right now. But with the benefit of these higher quality clips that we're going to have created, they're going to go out on your LinkedIn profile. They're going to go out on other subject matter experts' LinkedIn profiles as well. But if you've got these amazing clips, why wouldn't you start growing another channel with them? It would take you 2 minutes just to put them together and put them out on another channel. So that's made up part of the YouTube strategy. So we're going to take 5 clips per video recorded episode of the podcast. I'm going to pick the time codes for those. That comes back to the human side of it. And I'm going to pass those along to the video editor, put it together with the hooks, as I mentioned before, and then they're going to go onto that YouTube channel. I've previously grown YouTube channels, be them business channels, personal channels to me, with shorts feeds solely. There's something different about the shorts feed, and I was always taught to separate the long form side of YouTube to the short side of YouTube. Think of them as 2 completely different channels. You've got a shorts audience, like a more TikTok and Instagram Reels audience, and then you've got more of a long form audience, more of a podcasty style audience. So we're going to get those shorts out there, see how they perform. I'm expecting growth quicker than what we've had already. And then I'm going to continue posting the podcast in its long form entirety onto YouTube, but we're going to be changing things. We're going to be adding things like YouTube chapters. We're going to be adding YouTube SEO, so properly optimized titles and descriptions. And then there's an opportunity for us to cut that long YouTube video up and make those long podcast episodes a 4 or 5 minute video that can stand alone on its own. And then before we know it, from just a podcast, we've got a clip going out almost every day on the channel. And depending on how many videos we made from one large podcast episode, we could have could have 2 or 3 long form videos going out a week on YouTube as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how that new channel can open up new revenue for us. What I always say to smaller businesses is that you should actually focus on one particular channel. Like that's what we did as a business, is that we just went all in on LinkedIn. We didn't bother with Instagram or YouTube or any other channels. It was all about LinkedIn because we were small and because we had a small budget. If we tried to spread across multiple platforms, it would have been like trying to kind of boil the ocean. So we did the right thing, I think, by going all in at LinkedIn. And now that we're bigger and we've got more budget, now we started doing a podcast. So we even have Spotify as an attribution channel for us, which is amazing. And now we're going into YouTube. And then next, maybe it would be TikTok and Instagram. But I think certainly starting small, dominating a platform, creating great content, and then as the budget increases, as the company grows, then you open up new channels. So for us, YouTube, I think, is the obvious next play for us. I'm not that bothered about having millions of subscribers. I know that you don't need that many subscribers, you just need the right subscribers. So yeah, really looking forward to creating more video content like this that we're doing on the podcast, also like talking head videos, and it just basically gives us like another search engine of people that are looking for SaaS marketing advice, SaaS marketing agencies. It's just going to get more people into the funnel. I'm pretty confident it's going to result in more pipeline. So no, excited to see that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really important that you remember that self-reported attribution, because it's easier to track what's doing well on your website. So blogs, views, impressions, click-throughs, and all that side of things. But when you come to things like social media, so say you've put your short out on TikTok, and it's like, well, how do we know how much pipeline that's generating? Has it generated any leads? That's where the self-reported attribution comes in. Let's say we've been running the new reformatted YouTube channel for 6 months. I want to see the percentage of YouTube citations in that self-reported attribution that we receive from our form going up and up and up. That's how we'll gauge the impact that those social media channels are having. And that's just a great tip for anyone that wants to understand the influence that they're having. This is something that I learned even not that long ago. Everyone always said, let's make YouTube videos. But you always want to bring it back to understand the impact it's actually having, and that's the best way.
Nice. Okay, and then I know you also looked at personal brands. Obviously, Rocket SaaS is creating content from the company brand, and then there's also some personal brand happening. Like me personally, I've been very active for the last 3-4 years on LinkedIn. I know you dived into that and came up with some really interesting sort of ideas around that. But yeah, tell us about that piece.
Yeah, so I mean, it's, as you've just said, it's worked absolutely fantastically for you. You're even getting recognised a little bit out and about, aren't you?
I got recognised at the driving range the other day.
Love that. See, celebrity, local celeb, LinkedIn celeb. That's what we want for other people within the business, right? So I've seen a lot of impact had from widening that out. Let's go back to my time at Cognizant, for example. Because one of our target audiences was salespeople, and more specifically SDRs, luckily there were SDRs in the business. So I created some LinkedIn posts for those SDRs. They were just thought leadership captions, which then led into a piece of content. It could have been a blog or it could have been a video. So this is the sort of thing we want to start implementing at Rocket SaaS. We want to start growing out, and I've started with the senior leadership team because it's the senior leadership team who are going to be more likely on discovery calls, sales calls. They're going to be on presentations to the client. So it's a great piece to have for a brand like Rocket SaaS for when, say, an account director is presenting to a client and then someone like Jess or Nick is on the call. It would be fantastic to get to a place where the client on that call recognizes these people, recognizes Jess, recognizes Nick, and they're all automatically, it's just the human way, they're automatically put at ease. And so what I've put into place is using our tool where everything sort of sits at Rocket SaaS, Asana. I've put together a SME, subject matter expert, posting content calendar. So I've assigned tasks to Jess, Nick and Jamie, senior leaders, who once a week to post from their LinkedIn profiles. And the biggest issue you're going to have with this is buy-in. It's basically getting these people to actually post, because they'll say, oh yeah, I'll do that, but it's a struggle. It can be a struggle to get a leader. They're super busy, so you have to enable them with everything you possibly can. So what I've done for Jess, Nick and Jamie, say, is I have put content options for them on Asana. So I've said, I need a thought leadership caption from you this week, and I need it to lead into a podcast episode, a clip, a blog. And then they can pick. I don't want to write their content for them because it's not going to sound like them. If I'm writing for them, they're going to be on that call and they're going to be sounding different to how they're coming across on LinkedIn. Plus, these people are going to have better personal experiences than I had. So that's why we want to grow out the personal brands. That's why it's better that they create their own posts. And you can get that internal buy-in by enabling them the best as possible, as best you possibly can, by making sure that it'll take them 2 minutes instead of 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, I've always said many times that my personal brands have been one of the biggest growth levers of the agency for sure. So it's a really exciting thing to think. Imagine if there was like 5 of us doing it. It's going to quintuple the activity and the personal brand growth on LinkedIn. I know that a lot of SaaS businesses, but most SaaS businesses, are ultimately trying to sell the business at some point in the not too distant future. And yeah, growing your personal brand is amazing, and it is really important to drive that pipeline at the beginning. But that can kind of bite you in the backside when you try to sell it, because if the business is really evolving around your personal brand and someone wants to buy that business and therefore you are not going to be in the business anymore, suddenly that's a problem for the person buying it. So elevating the employees of the company can be brilliant. So it means that there's less kind of leverage required from the founder of the business, and it can just have other magical impacts as well, particularly for salespeople. So like at Rocket SaaS, I've always been the salesperson from the start. And it's a really awesome thing when someone jumps on a sales call with me, we've never met each other before, and they feel like they know me. They feel like they like me already because they've been following me, they've seen me, they've seen my videos, listened to my podcast. So like the trust is already there, which is like the number one thing that a salesperson needs to get is trust. So most of the time, 99 times out of 100, if you jump on a call with a salesperson and you don't know who they are, you don't recognize them. But every now and then you get a salesperson that's very active on LinkedIn and they're well known, and then you jump on a call with them. And again, like I said, that trust, that know you, like you, trust you is already there. And it also works from an account management perspective, from a customer success perspective, and it just elevates your business. It just elevates your brand when the client, the customer starts to see the employees being active, creating great content. It just makes you kind of respect them. And in turn, that can make you raise your prices. It can make you a more premium brand because we're experts, and you can see that we're experts because we're creating so much content, not just from the brand, but from the people. So that's a brilliant way to do it. But yeah, I think to wrap this episode up, so you came in, the first thing you did was look at the data. It's a smart thing to do in terms of analyzing what pieces of content is working, what is not working, HubSpot attribution, self-reported attribution, Google Analytics, website traffic and website dwell time, things like that. You identified that these things that we're putting energy into is just not really working. It's not resulting in any kind of pipeline, in our case, the blogs. So we're making some changes to them, possibly ditching them. You identified what content is actually working in terms of actually driving pipeline. So for us, it was the podcast, the LinkedIn content that we're doing, my personal brand, and then you put a plan in place on how can we accelerate that. Like one of my favorite sayings in marketing is understand what's working and do more of it. And that is a classic thing that you've come in and you've done, is that you've told us things that we kind of knew already in our heads, but you presented it to us and said, like, this is actually working. So if we crank the handle on these particular levers, the podcast, the personal branding, the LinkedIn content that we're doing, the short videos, it's almost definitely going to increase pipeline. So that's what a content specialist can come in and do, is tell you what's working, what's not working, how it's affecting pipeline, and give you a roadmap in terms of how to improve. That was exactly what you've done. So very excited to see what that can do for Rocket SaaS. But thank you so much for coming back on the show, and I'm sure you'll be back at some point soon. So definitely. I'll see you then.
See you later.
And everyone else, see you next week on the SaaS Marketing Weekly podcast.